Alright friends, welcome back to the Banker Pippo YouTube channel. You're watching another episode of Women's Soccer World where we talk all about the world of women's soccer and all the glorious things going on within it. Today, we're going to talk all about USA versus Paraguay in the first friendly in their 2-game series. But first, I want to invite you guys to like, comment, subscribe, and check out any of these other great players to join the fun. I greatly appreciate it. So I'm just going to cut right to the chase. The US beat Paraguay by a scoreline of 9-0. It was a slaughter of a game. It aired on ESPN alongside the great Sebastian Salazar and Julie Foudy commentation combo that I absolutely love and adore. This game was very one-sided, I think, as a lot of people expected, in that, frankly, we've all kind of accustomed to when the US plays teams that don't meet too often, which is Paraguay fitting that description. Carli Lloyd ended up finishing up with 5 goals. That's right, you heard that right, 5 goals. Andy Sullivan added 2, Lynn Williams added 1, and Tobin Heath also added another coming off of the bench, totaling 9. My overall thoughts, Carli Lloyd's only got a few games left in her career, and for her to score 5 is really, really exciting. The fact that it feels weird, her career coming to an end. I talked about that in a previous episode, so I won't bore you guys too much with that, but it's really surreal. Only a few games left. I wonder if she'll go for Mia Hamm's all-time scoring record. I believe Mia Hamm is second all-time in scoring. Carli Lloyd is now in third. So if Carli Lloyd scores 15 more goals in these next 3 games, well then she'll tie Mia Hamm or perhaps even beat her record. Do I think she'll do it? Nah. But, you know, she might go for it. What else were some of my key takeaways from this game? So one thing I really enjoyed about this game is the fact that other players are starting to get the nod and start getting acclimated into the squad. As I've mentioned in a previous episode about a month ago, I think the US is going to be entering a transition period because a lot of their star players are starting to get on the cusp of either retiring or exiting their prime. So they're going to need players eventually, young or old, to fill in their spots. So now's as good a time as any, especially since all the other major tournaments are at least 2 years out, and the next one being the next FIFA World Cup. So some of the players who came to mind that got their shot this game, Lynn Williams started. Mallory Pugh was excellent to see in the game. I thought she did okay. She had a couple of great through balls, played some really good left wing play, and I'm excited to see her slowly work her way back into the squad because I think she does have a future here. And Andy Sullivan was great to see coming off. Adriana French again playing was great to see, and seeing Tierna Davidson get the start alongside Becky Sarburn was really cool to see. I think that although these players all got their time, I'll even add Christy Mewis into the mix. I think that the US probably could have did an even better job of doing so, especially in defense. Alana Cook comes to mind. I think she could have benefited from playing in this game. The time to start introducing newer players is probably now. Even the fact that Carli Lloyd started, to me, I get it. She's only got a few more games till retirement, so that's probably the main reason why, but maybe Carli Lloyd's a bad example, but like Crystal Dunn and Kelly O'Hara, and Becky Sauerbrunn, for those 3 to start, it's like, why? I mean, you could have brought in some other defenders to try to get acclimated into the squad. Even if Abby Dahlkemper would have started over and played most of the game over Becky Sauerbrunn, I would have been okay with that because Tierna Davidson and Abby Dahlkemper are the future of this team. That's what it's essentially going to come down to eventually. Whether or not it's now or 2 years from now, I guess we'll have to see. I mean, maybe I'm being a little bit harsh in that respect, but I just would love to see more players starting to get into the mix. But they've got to earn their way in. They've got to earn their way in and prove that they belong. So that's on them to bear that proof. What other things did I take away from this game? The one thing I really enjoyed seeing was the fact that the US made the most of their corners. I have been critical of US set pieces in general since Coach Vlatko Andonovski took over, but they've been especially poor on converting their corners into goals. But this game, they had a few goals based off of their corners, and it was just kind of great to see them sort of convert those chances. I don't know if they necessarily tried something different tactically in this case. It's really hard to tell because of the fact that they didn't play against the greatest competition, and I say that with the utmost respect to Paraguay, but the reality is Paraguay are not a great side. They didn't defend well. They barely had the ball. US had 74% possession, if I'm not mistaken. I believe they had 15 shots, and I don't think Paraguay had a shot on goal. So that kind of tells you all you really need to know. I mean, the US had 15 corners. 15. That's a lot of corners. And for them to not, if the US didn't score on any of them, I would have been very concerned. But in this case, the managed to slot home some goals. But I can't tell if it's credit to the US for scoring on them or credit it to the fact that Paraguay are just poor defensively. I don't know, and that's the hard part about when you play teams like Paraguay. And like I said, I don't want to sound arrogant or pompous in that respect. It's just the reality of the situation. I think Julie Foudy even mentioned it herself that Paraguay is just not a federation that really meets too often, and that seems to be a commonality against some of the teams that the U.S. plays against. Argentina comes to mind. Paraguay comes to mind. I believe Jamaica comes to mind as well. I don't believe they really meet too often as a team. Venezuela comes to mind, and it's just the way it is. It's just the way the state of women's football around the world right now, and that's just kind of the hand that we're dealt. So, good on the U.S. for converting those corners because scoring goals isn't easy. But will that be because of tactics? Time will tell. We'll just have to watch out for other games and see if their corners and set pieces end up continuing to improve. So, another point that I want to get into, and what I'm actually going to do with this is I'm going to kind of combine it into another news story that came out earlier this week in the world of WOSO. So you'll know what I'm talking about in just a second. Whenever I see the U.S. get these big wins, the 5-0 wins, the 4-0 wins, the 6-0 wins, the 9-0 wins, I used to get really excited and really pumped to see them win because as a fan, you always love to see your team win, right? And to see your team win big, which is great. But now that we've gone through as fans the Olympics and we've seen the fact that these games don't necessarily challenge the US, and if you're not challenged as a team, you're not going to grow. So I found it, after watching this game, I was kind of reflecting, and I found it very, very hard to really think much of this win at all. Now, I don't want to take away anything from the US because, duh, I'm a fan, but and the fact that scoring scoring 9 goals in a game against any team is very difficult to do, especially in a professional game. So I can't take that away from the U.S. And I especially can't take that away from Carli Lloyd because scoring 5 goals in a game by any stretch of the imagination is hard to do. Having said that, Paraguay as a federation, it doesn't meet too often, and I'm finding that that is a pretty big commonality with Central and South American teams, at least from what I've been reading and hearing. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe I heard Julie Foudy say during the game that Paraguay hadn't met very often at all in like the last 18 months. I forgot how many times she said, but when a team doesn't ever play and then they play against the US, who is one of the best teams in the world, of course the US are going to thrash them because the US meets all the time and they play against way better competition. And like I said, if the US doesn't play teams that challenge them, they're not going to get any better. And to see them put out their best squad or some of their better squads against these sides, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially if they're entering a period of transition phase, which is why I said earlier I would have liked to have seen the US utilize more players that maybe weren't so familiar and veteran in the squad. So that's kind of where I'm coming from in that respect. And it makes me wonder why the US really continues to schedule some of these friendlies and also schedule some of these teams in the She Believes Cup if they ultimately don't think that, or maybe they do think that they will be challenged, but they're not ultimately being challenged, or at least I don't think they really are, to really push themselves to get better. And like I said, perhaps I'm being a little too harsh in that case, but I just think overall for the team to get better, either they have to put out their best squad against the best competition in the world, so the Englands, the Germanys, the France, the Spains of the world, or they can grow and develop their squad with other players, perhaps younger players that aren't so veteran in the squad, in games like this where they're playing against Paraguay, Argentina, Venezuela. Like I said, no disrespect to them. It's just the reality of the federations around the world of women's football today. So maybe the answer is a hybrid. Maybe the answer is a little bit of both, because by having your younger players or your less veteran players playing in these friendlies against not great competition, at least gives them the opportunity to learn. It gives them the opportunity to grow at an earlier stage in their national careers, but then use these really big high stakes games for the more veteran players and your best players in the squad in order to really challenge the squad as a whole and really push them to test out tactics, different changes, different set pieces, things like that. So That's just kind of been on my mind lately with this team, and it begs the question: should they leverage the She Believes Cup perhaps in a much better effect to get even better teams than they've been already getting? I mean, Canada and Brazil, I'd say, are probably very good competition that will push the team. But why not make the tournament maybe even a little bit bigger and go get England, France, Spain? Of course, we're still in the middle of a global pandemic, so that probably has something to do with it. But if you can't get the teams to come to you, maybe try to secure a spot in some of these other tournaments. For example, and this is where the next news point of the week is going to come into play. It was announced that England is actually going to host their own version, I guess we'll call it, of the She Believes Cup starting in 2022. It's a 4-team invitational. It's going to be England, it's going to be Spain, it's going to be Germany, and one other team that they haven't announced yet. And this was rumored actually dating months ago. I actually made a little video about it. I'll try to link it somewhere in the description of this video. But that's coming to fruition. Why doesn't the U.S. lobby for themselves to be that 4th team? England's come in and played over in the She Believes Cup on many occasions. Why not go over to England and play in that tournament? And then play against the top tier teams of the world like England and Germany and test your veteran players against and your veteran tactics against these teams in order to grow. Because one, it's much more interesting as a team to grow the team and make them get better. It's also more interesting as fans. I like seeing really great competition. Maybe you as a fan, maybe you don't feel the same way. Maybe you like seeing these thrashings, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just kind of speaking from my own personal perspective without sounding too, what do you call it, pompous and arrogant when it comes to the US too. It's just the reality of the situation. Like I said, if you're not going to challenge your team is not going to get better. So that's just my thoughts on everything overall. I still enjoyed seeing the US win. And if you guys want to see them play in another match, you're in luck, because later on this week on Tuesday, September 21st, they're going to be playing at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time in Cincinnati against Paraguay again. So you got another match to look forward to. I don't know what to expect for this match because it's another friendly. They'll have a couple more continuing on with other matches in the future in the next month. So we'll just have to keep our eye out and see what happens. But my friends, I ask you, what did you make of the USA and Paraguay match? Are you looking forward to the next match? Whatever you think, the comment section is. Let me know. That is going to do it for this episode of Women's Soccer World. Thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, or check out any of those other great playlists to join on the fun. This has been the Bankrupt Hippo YouTube channel. Have a great day.